decades, now at Sporting News as well as at Sirius XM. He is our South Florida friend that has moved somehow to almost North Florida at this point, and he is a wrestling expert from many, many, many moons ago down in the South Florida area. So in all the spirit of Andre the Giant and the Ravens draft next week, we welcome the man, the myth, the Giant himself. Alex Marvez joins us here from Sirius XM and Sporting News. You can follow him, his beautiful dog, out on Twitter at Alex Marvez, and tens of thousands do. And they do, Marvez, because you know Andre the Giant, and that's why I called you. But we'll talk some football too, man.
I appreciate that, Nestor. And yes, indeed, I am not going to drink 196 beers in one sitting like Andre did. I could always try to keep up, but not going to be happening, but obviously larger-than-life figure. And listen, Drew is due from the HBO documentary. Now, I got to say this. I am not a WWE fan. I don't watch things associated with WWE. They always change history, and there are plenty of little inaccuracies, and, you start adding up a lot of little inaccuracies, and it leads to an inaccurate documentary. We're not supposed to believe that Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant didn't have a designated match finish, for months going into the match, and it was going to be Andre making that decision and things like this. I mean, just silly stuff like that. But listen, people enjoyed it. It got a huge response. And really, Andre, the fact that he's been passed away now for more than 20 years and yet, still elicits such a response from folks, will just sort of tell you the legacy that he left behind. He was a larger-than-life individual in so many ways. And, the fact that Prince's Bride, he has that enduring role, and that's really what he wanted people to remember him by. That's, was as that fun-loving, friendly giant who was trying to do the right thing, and I think that's really where it was at. But listen, a very complicated individual as well, someone who struggled getting from place to place. He used alcohol as a big-time crutch in so many ways, because quite honestly, not only was he addicted to it, I just think it served as an escape mechanism for someone who simply couldn't live a normal life because they weren't normal-sized. He was part of the traveling circus that is professional wrestling.
Well, dude, I've known you so long, and I guess I knew you in the beginning through wrestling and being down in South Florida. I was down there for years covering the Orioles and stuff, and we sort of fell in. But I really don't know your wrestling background. Mine's pretty clear to you. I grew up in Baltimore in the 70s with San Martino and Superstar Graham and Championship Wrestling and a Gary Michael Capetta, who joined us earlier this week, and we chatted about Andre too. And for me, I don't know if you touched Andre. I did when I was a boy. He came in twice a year, right? Once a year to wrestle a bad guy or whatever. And then, the other time was for the Battle Royal in the summer when they gave Backlund or Bruno or, somebody was on tour somewhere. And I remember, he was absolutely larger than life. He walked across the stage at the Baltimore then Civic Center, now the Royal Farms Arena. And he would come down to the ring, and much part of the video of it all, Alex, was that Andre was very alive to me during those 90 minutes with Simmons. The video was so well done. It felt very alive to me for him, and I felt like I hadn't seen or heard from him in 25 years. And it's like, oh, Andre, he's still there. There he is. I don't think of him in sort of the dead, deceased mode. I think of him as sort of larger than life. And these stories that go along, the Paul Bunyan-y kind of tales grow taller on down the line stuff about how incredible WrestleMania 3 was. For you to fall in love with wrestling, what drew you in? Was it Andre at some Miami sportatorium that I'm unaware of when you were a kid or something?
Well, I think it was, really Championship Wrestling from Florida, and as you alluded to, in WWWF was a regional territory at the time, a regional company, and wrestling was held, that WWWF held, court predominantly in the northeastern United States, obviously, and, for Championship Wrestling from Florida, when you had an announcer like Gordon Soley, who made everything so serious and was just such an incredible voice, someone who actually got to meet later in life. He was part of the glue that you came back watching week to week because he told a story. And listen, as a kid, you grew up, and at the time, you thought wrestling was real. You really did, and then as you get a little bit older, you start to become suspicious about, are these matches really on the up and up as you get a little bit older? And then, when I was attending a show in Miami Beach, it was Andre. In fact, it was the original Sheik, Ed Farhat, squaring off against Bruiser Brody, the late great Bruiser Brody, and they brawled through the entire Miami Beach Convention Center. One of the most memorable shows I ever had, but it's also memorable simply because before the show started, someone said, you're a real big wrestling fan. You may want to learn how it works behind the scenes. Here's this address. Send $6 and get this newsletter. And it's for the Wrestling Observer newsletter. So my first edition came March 2nd of 1987, and I was blown away. And as I continued to read about the industry, learned about the industry, I wanted to start writing about it. So I began a pro wrestling column in the Miami Herald when I was just graduating from high school, and I continued to write. I took that with me to Dayton, Ohio, took it with me to Denver, Colorado on my journey journalistically, and then back to South Florida. And for 23 years, I wrote a pro wrestling column. It's just as my interest started to wane in it, and this was a couple of years ago, WWE was the only game in town, and there was it just didn't have a lot of appeal to me anymore. I've just moved on to some other things, so I stopped writing it because I just felt I was going to be disingenuous with it. But that era that you referred to, the 1970s and 1980s, in so many ways it does live on, because you've now got YouTube and you can go back and you can watch all of these classic matches. For some folks, it's WWE, their pay-per-view, their channel, their WWE network, and you can access all these things on the archive and take a look at stuff that brings you back to a happy place in life. And I think that's why, it's one of the reasons that I YouTube or I DVR the A-Team, right? I sit there and I watch A-Team episodes with my kids because it's fun. It's something that just takes your mind off everything. You don't have to, you don't get upset about it. It's not politics. It's nothing angry about it. And so I think that's really what it stemmed from. And as far as Andre, I did get the chance to see him perform live. I was at a hotel one time where he was drinking. And listen, I wasn't there to see the whole thing, but this is how I understand it all played out. Philadelphia Airport Marriott, he drank so much that he passed out in the lobby of the hotel. And what do you do with a 6'9" is legit, maybe, but 7 foot tall guy at least, right? 500 pounds, no questioning that. What do you do with him when he's passed out in your lobby? Well, you're not going to pick him up. So what they were suggesting was perhaps putting hooks under his arms and dragging him out the front door with a tow truck. All this is being told to me secondhand because, I had gone to sleep. I was an 18-year-old kid. I had no idea. So apparently they had this yellow tarp on him, and they just decided to set it up like there was a mess. You know what I mean? Like something had gone wrong, so they put orange cones around Andre. He finally got up, rolled the tarp off, figured out finally where he was, and then got up and went all the way back to his hotel room. But for a while, he was just one giant tarp in the Philadelphia Airport Marriott at that time.
I will never pass the Philadelphia Airport Marriott on 95 and not honk the horn in Andre's memory in that way. So
Indeed.
Yeah, Alex Marvez is our guest from Sirius. Just one more thing on wrestling, as I like to. Were you at the Race Graham match at the Orange Bowl in '78?
I was too young. I was 7 years old. I did get to War Games back in 1987, the second War Game show ever held. But, that was huge when you had Harley Race, the NWA champion, facing superstar Billy Graham, the WWF champion. And you would have those types of matches from time to time, a dream match, because people that were wrestling fans didn't, wasn't covered as a legitimate sporting enterprise or even an illegitimate one by the newspapers. It fell through the cracks, quite honestly. It wasn't sports because sports editors loathed it because the matches were predetermined. And it was just too violent, too sports-like for entertainment. So, you would turn a lot of time to, if you wanted to read about the sport, and there weren't, as a kid, you're not really following insider newsletters, things like that, but you turn to what we would call the after magazines, those on-the-shelf pro wrestling magazines. And
Pro Wrestling Illustrated, The Wrestler, Inside Wrestling. I was a subscriber, man. My aunt tried to get me like a National Geographic subscription, or Ranger Rick, 1 year for Christmas. I'm like, Aunt Clara, man, just get me the books. We called them the books. Eck and I would call each other when the books came. Did you get your books this month? And like, if he would get the mail and get them, and I didn't, he always got his before I got mine, like a day before.
So funny.
It wasn't right.
So funny.
Kevin Eck. Kevin Eck was one of the faces of wrestling in 1975 in either The Wrestler or Inside Wrestling. Remember they would put the little faces in the middle? He was one. Ask him about it. He was one.
Great.
He and his mom mailed off the postcard, and he got his little picture in the wrestling magazine. He still has it. I promise you he does.
It's so great. And see, that's how we got our information. So anytime you'd have a champion versus champion match, because you'd always try to say, well, who is better, the NWA or the WWF, or the NWA or the AWA, where they had Vern Gagne or Nick Bockwinkel as champion the predominant amount of time. So you'd get into that, and it is interesting, too, because interpromotional feuds later on would play a big role in everything. When you would have the successful invasion angles, or the unsuccessful ones because Vince McMahon didn't know how to do them. But when you had the outsiders from the NWO come into WCW, how hot that became. when you had that outside element of something that disrupted the fabric of a pro wrestling company, even though they were all being paid by the same promoter, to fans, a lot of them were just willing to suspend their disbelief, or they simply bought it, and they absolutely loved it. So that's been one of the things as well. So yeah, I mean, you see those are the types of memories, like you say. You're reeling off a match here that was held 40 years ago, like it just happened yesterday. So that'll tell you right there what an impact it made on your life, and it definitely made a big one on mine.
Well, it came right after, I was there the night that Bruno lost the belt to Graham in 77, April 30th, 1977. Not that I remember the date, or I'm getting all, what's the chick from Taxi that knows every date in her life? Or Mary Lou Henner, right? I don't want to get that crazy. All of this is brought to you by our friends at Howard Bank, a relentless commitment to being the best at everything they do. And, of course, our Thursday Charity and Community Be More Positive series brought to you by Howard Bank, as well as our friends at Cole Roofing. We'll be chatting with some other great charities this week. If you want to get in line, toss me an email, nasty@WNST.net. Also brought to you by Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast, the tasty coffee, the best fried chicken in the land, and, of course, the app that Justin Tucker made famous. Download that, use it, get free Western fries. And Marvez doesn't even know what Western fries are because they don't have Western fries in Gainesville or in Florida. They have Morofo around here. Let's get to football, dude. We got a draft going on next week. I spent Tuesday afternoon out in the Owings Mills complex. Flacco, Weddle, the usual suspects in chatting with the media. And there's optimism almost everywhere, man. Like, you cover the NFL, I cover the NFL. We see each other at a lot of these events. But I also talk about the NBA and the NHL and baseball. Lord knows baseball here. That the NFL's special in a lot of ways because next Thursday night, this made-for-television production is going to come on, and the schedule's going to come out this week and all that. But really, like 25 of these teams really believe they can win the Super Bowl, if not more. Even the San Franciscos and the Jacksonvilles and the total dregs have a belief that they can win 10, 11, or 12 games this year because, well, let's see, Jacksonville did it last year. The Rams did it last year. It's amazing how hope springs this league this time of the year where almost everybody has it.
Well, and it's a great point, as usual, Nestor, simply because, that's what happens now with the draft. It provides hope for a team. Your team may have done diddly squat in free agency. Okay, but here they're going to be able to start filling positions to get better, and then you start to see the highlights of these players. You don't see a lot of lowlights, by the way, on draft weekend. You see a lot of highlights of most players, and you start getting amped up, and you start thinking about football. And listen, absence makes the heart grow fonder. So we haven't seen NFL football since, and if your favorite team was out of the playoffs, like the Baltimore Ravens right before, the end of the year, well, guess what? You haven't seen professional football now in almost 4 months by the time the draft rolls around, and you still got another 4 months or so till you see it again. I mean, it's something that has become so ingrained in our culture that, you love your professional football. And this is one of the few events that then touches that nerve in the off season. Look, we can all go to the NFL Scouting Combine like you and I do, the NFL owners meetings. I mean, again, and there's news there and you can read it, but the draft is almost something that you can touch. I mean, you know what I mean? You could just see it on your television. You can, even if you don't know about these folks, now you have something to go research going into it. And of course, the hype that goes into it, hardcore fans. So, look, if you're a Ravens fan, you're saying, okay, are we going to get a wide receiver? Are we going to address the offensive line? What are we doing in round 1, round 2? I mean, look, the later rounds, that gets to be more of a crapshoot, obviously, but are we going to be able to address a position? Am I going to feel better about my team after draft weekend? And I think that's so much of what it comes down to. Look, how much better are Jets fans going to feel knowing that by their team moving up from 6 to 3, they've put themselves in position to finally look like they're getting their first franchise quarterback since Joe Namath back in, the 1960s. I mean, that's exciting. The Cleveland Browns, who they walk away with, it's going to be controversial, but that's going to be exciting. Saquon Barkley was so great at Penn State, and he's such a nice young man, and you pull for the guy, he's going to have a new home, and that team is going to be excited. And of course, then you've got those that are left holding the bag. Are the Bills going to be able to get their quarterback, Nestor? I mean, they move up from 21 to 12 with Cincinnati. They trade Cordy Glenn. The Jets panic. They're like, we're not going to let these guys jump up. So they move to 3. Are the Bills going to be able to get the quarterback that they want? Are the Dolphins going to trump them? Are the Arizona Cardinals waiting in the weeds with a 15th pick and then ready to jump up when the time is right? I mean, this is a very fascinating draft. I mean, we know who the guys are likely to get picked, but the order of them, that gets a little bit tricky.
Alex Marvez can be found on Twitter as well as at Sirius XM on the NFL channel, as well as at Sporting News as their NFL columnist, but not writing any more about Andre the Giant. We're still into football here and making this thing. Before I get to the Ravens and just your thoughts on that, globally, you mentioned these wildcat trades that happen 2 months before the draft now, the weirdness of the whole Alex Smith thing and the timing of that going down, when it went down. The last couple of years, we're starting to see this modern version of NFL general managers and the use of trades and trading up, trading back. That's gone on draft day forever. Compensatory picks couldn't be dealt in the past. But more than that, just player-on-player trades or the creativity that creates trades in this league, it really does feel like there's never a lost moment in the league anymore, that they're always talking about something creative. And a lot of these guys are very smart, very creative people. Maybe we shouldn't be shocked, but it feels like the trade thing's on the uptick, and it does give this wild, wild west feeling on Thursday. Not that Dick is going to come back and deal away a whole draft for Ricky Williams, but some stuff's going to happen on Thursday that no mock drafter could possibly predict. But that doesn't just go to draft day. That goes to the league in general, because trades are a part of the vernacular in the NFL where they used to just not be, right?
Right. I mean, that's the thing, and and you mentioned it in your comments about this. Younger generation of general managers, they're not being as conservative as they once were. And look, sometimes teams that make very bold decisions have it pay dividends in a huge way. Just take a look at the Philadelphia Eagles, and the Rams themselves said, "Hey, look, we saw what the Eagles did, how bold they were. They were aggressive. They went after players that they thought that they wanted." And I think teams have learned here how to work the free agent system a little bit as well, and the rookie salary cap. You notice now players in their third year of the rookie deal are getting traded more and more. Those who are angling for a contract extension, you're seeing teams that are more willing to just move on from players, and they become much more exchangeable commodities. You've seen it different as well as far as the way contracts are negotiated in free agency. Even the big deals that were done in free agency usually have outs for the teams after 2 or 3 years. I mean, you could talk about 5-6 year contracts. Not only are those fewer and further in between, players aren't willing to sign them because they want some freedom and teams aren't offering them. It's just become a different type of league. It's almost, in some ways, like a year-to-year league, more so than ever before. Yes, you're going to keep your core players, but the change-out that the New England Patriots have been doing for some time has become a lot more common. And, listen, to see like a T-Sizzle in Baltimore and how long he's lasted there. I mean, it is just such an anomaly, or a Joe Flacco lasting as long as he has. Marshall Yanda. I mean, Ravens fans should really appreciate the fact that they have these guys, because I think so many teams are going to be doing what others have done now, which is just simply keep moving guys along. You'll try to take care of some of your base players, your cornerstone types of players, but everyone else becomes expendable. And I think the way that the salary cap has worked, teams have massaged that. There's more flexibility than ever before, and there's also just more of an urgency to win now. I mean, that's why everyone hates the term rebuilding, right, Nestor? They talk about retooling. It's not rebuilding, it's retooling, because you don't have 2-3 years to put things together. Just ask Sashi Brown when he was running the Cleveland Browns.
I was going to say, they call it something different in Cleveland, Alex. They don't call it retooling or rebuilding. I don't know what the hell they call it. They don't have a word for it there.
At least they've got it. It looks like they got the right guy in charge right now in John Dorsey, which is bad news for the rest of the AFC North, because there has been some competency in that building. But, you can't wait. You got to start getting some results, and I think that's why you see so many teams that are willing to make trades. The fear, though, is if you become like the Miami Dolphins, which is basically you're making these splash signings, these splash trades, these guys don't work out, well, then you keep going and you keep making other trades, and it's still not working out for you. And, of course, too, the key to everything, you got to have great quarterback play. And that's something that's just a consistency. And, of course, for the Baltimore Ravens, this is what makes it such a huge season for Joe Flacco. Are they going to get that great quarterback play once again by giving Joe a supporting cast, and does Joe still have it to be that great quarterback that we all know he once was? Because, quite honestly, he's not a great quarterback now.
Well, Ozzie Newsome and Eric are getting beaten up here the last 5 years, as maybe they should on Matt Elam and Perryman and the second-round disappointments, and whether Correa's ever going to get out on the field, and, all of the Arthur Browns that have come and gone through this. But, over the last 5 years, they've also lost an incredible amount of players to free agency that maybe they would have liked to have kept Ryan Jensen around, or Ricky Wagner around, or Kelechi Assembly around. Certainly other teams like those guys enough to give them just crazy contracts by the Ravens standards. But, Ozzie's not getting credit for those guys. Those guys are going elsewhere. And unless you're getting a comp pick a year later, you wind up losing quality football players that you groom, because you can't afford to keep everybody. Once you give your quarterback $25 million, as the Ravens found out, it certainly does create sort of the whack-a-mole thing, and other problems pop up all over your roster when that is part of the deal.
I mean, think about this too, Nestor. You find even when every general manager misses, right? I mean, that's just the reality of it. The New England Patriots miss all the time, but they churn over their roster and they make up for it. And they also are flexible enough to go year to year the way that they sign their players. That bottom of the roster, it's almost like the bottom 25% is always churning. It's just how they operate. Well, look in the case of the Ravens. You don't hit on some guys, but then you sign a Leon Orr, right? And what an incredible signing, right? As a college free agent, the guy comes in, he's everything you could ask for as far as a tackling machine as a linebacker, and then, he suffers a career-ending neck injury. So right there, I mean, that just rips your heart out because you had found someone through college free agency and, he can't play again. I mean, you have a player die on you. Unfortunately, Trey Walker, 4th-round pick, who knows what he'd have been today? Would he still be playing? Things like that. I mean, and instead, he passes away in an ATV accident. I mean, these types of things have happened.
Sergio Kindle, how about that? I'll throw that.
Another one,
there you
right?
go.
Exactly.
It's been weird around here, man. And the wide receivers, 23 years, nobody's ever made a pick here. That'll never happen again. 23 consecutive drafts. Ozzy's the only human being who's ever picked a football player here, and he hasn't figured a wide receiver out yet. I mean, that's incredible.
And it is. But you know what happens, too? You keep changing the mix. That's part of the problem at offensive coordinator, and that's why, while I'm not the world's biggest Marty Morningway fan, at least there's some continuity there with the guy, and you know what it is that you're looking for at wide receiver. If you keep changing coordinators every year, the offense that Gary Kubiak runs is different than the one that Jim Caldwell runs, is different than the one that Mark Trestman wanted to run. That was an offense, right? But I mean, the point is,
we always forget about him. It's like he was never here. It's crazy.
Well, and you know what? I think there were some in Baltimore that wish that were the case. But I mean, when you keep changing guys around, well, the skill set of the players is different. Like when we were talking, and you were with me, Nestor, when I asked John about this, Harbaugh at the NFL owners meetings, and about the defense, and he said, "Look, the defense is the defense. It's like there's just a system in place, and the coaches there aren't expected to mess with it too much. You can add wrinkles, and Don Martindale, Wink has talked about we're going to be a more aggressive defense and things like that, and all the gaga that NFL fans love to hear, and I get all that, but the point is it's still pretty much the same defense you've seen year after year with tweaks to upgrade the way that according to a little bit of the talent, but just you've got the same system in place. It hasn't been the same with the offense, and that has created a bunch of challenges, and the injuries through the year have just crippled this team as well. So it's a combination of two things, those things. And look, this is a big year for Ozzie, the Ravens in the draft, to get it right. And at wide receiver, everyone's thinking, okay, look, it's going to be the best Alabama receiver available. Oh, it's Stephen Ridley. Hey, welcome to Baltimore, right? But I tell you what, keep an eye on a local prospect named DJ Moore, who may ultimately usurp Calvin Ridley as the number one pick in this year's draft. And one other thing about the receivers, too, Nestor, that's so tricky about this, we really only have one or two that have first-round type grades on them. And when I say first-round grades, too, it means they're going in the first round, but they're not blue-chip guys. I mean, Gil Brandt, my partner at Sirius XM NFL Radio, he's got 14 guys. It may increase to 15 or 16 that have legitimate first-round grades on them that say, yeah, in any year, these guys would be first-round picks. So that's about half the draft. So that's where things are tricky for the Ravens. And I tell you, if they don't take a wide receiver with that first pick in the first round, do not panic. I think there'll be some good value guys available, but you're not necessarily getting the most bang for your buck by taking a receiver in the first round because this year's class is just so darn shaky.
Well, we're looking at the centers, looking at the tackles, looking at tight ends, quite frankly. And, they passed on O.J. Howard last year. No disrespect to Marlon Humphreys. Looks like he's going to be a fine player and a nice value pick for them at a position where they certainly had some depth issues for long stretches at times, especially playing against the Roethlisbergers and the Bradys, every January and having to seal that down. But they passed on that guy last year that could have been a resource for Flacco in the case of the offense. It doesn't look like that guy's going to be there at 16 this year, that kind of guy.
Yeah, the thing with O.J. Howard, though, was, too, he had his moments as a rookie that he was a mess. And he, everyone thought he was that one guy. It was funny because they thought, oh, he's that one guy that is going to be seamless, and he'll make a quick impact at tight end. It didn't happen. You can go back to week 5 of the season when he's running the wrong, it's an option route against New England at the end of the game, and Jameis Winston throws a pass that could have won the game right at the goal line, and O.J. Howard goes the wrong way. He reads the defensive back wrong and screws it up. So, look, they had, and of course, did they expect Dennis Pitta to get, another hip injury that ended his career? No. At the time, you figure you're doing okay there. So I think offensive line, and listen, this is a Ravens team that needs a center. I don't think there's any question. They're lucky. Not lucky this year. I think they realized it when it came to Ryan Jensen that, hey, we're going to go in a different direction because this draft is so darn deep at the center spot. Tackles are not great. It's okay. I mean, it's not great by any means. Guards are good, but I mean, I'm not a big believer, unless it's really a special guard taking them early on in this draft, but there is help needed on this offense. They got to find something to be able to help protect Joe Flacco, and continue to make some dynamic plays in the passing game. And who knows? We'll see how this Dez Bryant situation plays out, but I just don't think there's much left in that tank, Nestor. I really don't. I think, at age 29, 3 years of declining numbers, he's not, he's a complimentary player. What the Ravens need is a difference maker. They don't need someone that's just, basically a lesser Michael Crabtree. And that's why I'm not so big on the signing. It's a great name. It's Dez Bryant. I get it. And people loved what he provided for the Cowboys, and they love doing the X symbol and all those sorts of things. But reality is that Dez Bryant has seen better days, much better days. Otherwise, he'd still be with the Cowboys.
Alex Marvez, always a wealth of information. Been my friend a couple of decades. You can find him out at Alex Marvez on Twitter, as well as at Sporting News and Sirius XM, where he, along with Gil Brandt and a whole bunch of other great broadcasters, joined together to do Sirius XM and get you NFL coverage. I'm sure they're not working you at all next weekend, right, Al?
Nah, nice and quiet, but you can check us out from Dallas, Texas. We'll be there starting on Tuesday, boots on the ground. Happy to be part of that Sirius XM NFL radio draft coverage, and I'll try to fit in some New Japan Pro Wrestling for my streaming system along the way.
Hard 8 barbecue, that's the only thing worth it in Dallas, okay? Just go with that. Hey, man, always a pleasure. Thanks for the Andre the Giant memories, and, I didn't realize you were one of those youngins that didn't make it to that Orange Bowl match. I would have put $1 on you at the Harley Race match. So
blame my dad. He did take me to the Miami Beach Convention Center, though, on a regular basis. So, bless him. Thank him. Rest in peace. He did. That was his great thing with me. Wednesday Night Pro Wrestling, Miami Beach Convention Center, $12 tickets, sat in the front row or the second row, and memories that lasted a lifetime.
I made my parents take me to see Stan the Man Stasiak with a hard punch take on Bruno Sammartino, and that just, my mom loved Brobo Brazil, and my parents used to go see Gorgeous George at the television tapings here in Baltimore back in the 50s, so they had, my parents had some pedigree with wrestling on the east side of Baltimore, so, and I'm like you, dude, I don't watch any of it. I just, it's kind of gone from me, kind of like the Bay City Rollers and some other things that maybe I did in the 70s that I don't do anymore,
That's exactly right, as long as that was all you did in the 70s. Oh, anyway, that's another conversation.
I listen to Kiss, too, like you did, so come on, be nice to me. Marvez, be well, man. Hey, rest up for the weekend, all right?
Thank you, brother.
Always my friend Alex Marvez, Sirius XM, as well as the Sporting News website at sportingnews.com. But find him out on Twitter at Alex Marvez. That's Marvez. You can find me, Nasty, at WNST.net. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. All of our WNST programming brought to you by our friends at King Discount Liquors. I gave the King a ring on Saturday. I went over the Malbec was on sale. So I had one of those big red baskets. I picked it up, threw like 6 bottles of Malbec in there for me and my wife, picked up some stout, and now I have plenty to medicate for the end of the cap season. Get to Rosedale, give the King a ring out on Pulaski Highway, 15 years. He's been our sponsor. As well, Fremont Mortgage. Don't make a 30-year mistake by choosing the wrong lender. You need the right lender. You need Fremont and their education online, whether you're buying, selling, or just in the market to learn a little bit and get your bearings on the most important asset in your life, your home. Go to Freedmont.com to learn more. Carl Delmont and I will be talking more about our swabbings for There Goes My Hero, as well as the World Cup, because we're soccer fans around here getting into June. I am officially supporting Iceland. I don't even know their nickname. The Fighting Icers, underdogs, almost on the North Pole. Been to Reykjavik a few times. It's all good. Go Iceland. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports. Thanks.